for Geomatic Resources in Houston, and today we're going to go over some Satel radio tips using the older EZ Pro radios and GS14s, and if we're integrating to the new GS18s. This is revision number 3, so thanks for paying attention, and let's just go over the tips. So back in 2016, we had a base Rover running GS14s. We used the older Satel EZ Pro radios. We're just tracking approximately 13 satellites, GPS and Russians. We're sending out this over the Satel EZ Pro at a Satel 4 FSK using RTCM version 3 MSN at a 1 second rate, and everything was fine. If we jump forward to 2024, we could be tracking GPS, Russian, European, and Chinese. This is approximately 30 satellites. And if we had the older radios, base radio, the older EZ Pro with the Satel 4 FSK has a hard time pushing all this data at 12.5 kilohertz. And the symptom is you might start seeing satellites being dropped on the rover end because this radio can't handle the bandwidth of data coming across. Okay? So right now, if I had a brand new base rover and we had a new Satel EZ Pro Plus, the new radio, we'd be fine because there's a new modulation type called Satel 16 FSK. We can use the 8 FSK, and that can push the data out fast enough. So if we're trying to integrate, it really is a really good shout out to the durability of a GS14. There's a bunch out there right now still holding up and working, and the Satel EZ Pro. So if we're integrating these with our current workflow, they don't have the capability of this new language, so we have to go with the lowest common denominator. And these are tips to optimize our settings on a radio. Okay, so as we talked about, there's 3 levels. The Satel EZ Pro was phased out in 2016. Once again, FCC required 12.5 kilohertz in the US. If you're working outside the US, 25 kilohertz would open up that bandwidth to alleviate this problem, but that's one of the issues about the 12.5 kilohertz. The Satel 4 Pro came out in 2020, was phased out in 2023, and the new radio is the Satel EZ Pro Plus. And here's pictures of them. They all look the same. And how we can tell the differences is a little label on the top here. They'll tell you what radio type that you're using. Okay. So once again, the old EZ Pro was using the Satel 3AS, and it's kind of confusing, but this Satel 3AS is the same as the Satel 4 FSK. Okay, so those are interchangeable. As the old style power cable, and we have an office software we can program it. If you have the survey firmware loaded, then we can have this little button here to change our channels. And on board Captivate, we'll go over it later, the device that we use is called the GFU27. The Satel 4 Pro came out, and once again, this came out right when all the GPS signals were increasing to have 4 constellations. And it had the 16 FSK, and once again, like we said, the 16 FSK handles the data a lot more efficiently. The old style power cable, and once again, the old version of office software we can program and set up the base radio. The device, once again, is called HPR3 on Captivate. We'll go through that. And once again, the new radio that was released is Satel EZ Pro Plus. And it's the same device down here. There's a new office software to program it, and there's a new power cable. Okay, so that's how you can tell also the difference. It'll be labeled up here, but there's also a bigger, thicker power cable. And once again, it can use the Satel 16 FSK. All right, it's important when you have your base radio to have an FCC license. This is some contact information. These are required to be renewed every 10 years. And right now they're issuing, I think, 4 or 5 standard frequencies that we program. And what's important is we won't go over this, but you have to have the vendor that you buy your Satel radio program those radios, and the call sign in for you. That way you're legal. And just here's some contact information if you need to get an FCC license. Satel does a very good job and pulling at them and can help you out with that. All right, let's take a look at a base station. So once again, if we're going to increase the range of our base station, there's a couple factors that we need to go over. We have our base station sensor set up. We're interfaced to our Satel base radio. First thing is you want to raise your base radio. It's important to use a 5 dB mobile whip antenna right here. If you can raise it up on a mast 12 to 15 feet, 3 to 5 meters, that height there is going to really increase your radio range. Inspect the radio cables, especially these mounts and cables here, like over a period of time. If these get damaged or kink, replace them. That little tip there can save you a lot of agony. Okay. Always use a powerful battery. Don't use a motorcycle battery, a 12-volt marine battery, or at least a 50 amp hour battery. Make sure that battery's charged the night before. And when you plug that battery in, when you look at the little display on the Satel, I'll show a voltage. Even without load, it should be around 12.8 to 13.1 volts. If you're using a 50 amp hour, 12-volt marine battery would be around 12.4, 12.5 without a load on it. If you put a load and you start transmitting data and it goes down into the 10 or low 11s, that means you need to get a new battery, and that's a common problem. So once a year, buy a new battery, swap it out, and charge it up every night. And once again, always set your base up in an open sky, not in a ditch, highest level as possible, so you don't want any obstructions, because once again, your rover is only as good as your base. If you're next to power lines, try to get as far away from possible, at least 75 feet or 25 meters. All right, what we'll do is we're going to switch over now to our simulator and take a look at some settings. Let me just get out of here. We'll minimize this. And then on the simulator, we'll take a quick look at our base station settings. And okay, get out of here, pull the simulator up. Okay, so right now on the simulator, I don't have it hooked up to the GPS, so just bear with me on the settings. And right now we have a network work style hooked up. So we got an icon here for the cell phone. So I go to settings, customization, work style. I've got a work style already set up, so I can say switch. And we'll switch to our RTK radio and hit next. And what you notice here is the icon up here changes to the radio. Okay. And I've got this set up where I have my switch to base mode right here. So under settings, customization, app visibility, I have the switch to base turned on, and it's set up somewhere that I can see it easily. Okay, we escape out of here. What we're going to do is take a look, and we'll go to switch to base. If I have my base station hooked up, it would basically pair up via Bluetooth, and we'd have a big circle here, and our CQs would be around 10 to 15 feet or 3 to 5 meters. And once again, the base never initializes. So under settings, let's take a quick look. Hit GS base, satellite tracking. This is where we're going to check if we're transmitting GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, Beidou from the base station. All these have to be checked to transmit that out. Okay. If you were just working and with older units that didn't have Galileo or Beidou, then you can uncheck these signals, and that would reduce the amount of data you're transmitting across. Under advanced, this is where we're going to set our cutoff angle. And right now, if you're using the older Satel radios, the Satel EZ Pro, I would set that to 13 degrees and have this always track automatic and turn off these two boxes here. And that's how you set the cutoff angle. If you're using a brand new GS18 with new radios, then you can set that to a 10 degree. But if you're using the older radios with the Satel 4FSK, then I'd recommend a 13 degree cutoff angle. Under settings GS base, if you're going to do static, you can just come over here to GNSS static, check that on. We put an SD card in the sensor, and then we can tell it, hey, let's record static every 5 seconds to Leica MDTV format, hit OK. Right now I'm going to uncheck that, but I just want to show you how you can turn static on. Okay. All right, if we hit settings, connections, connect to GS base. This be via Bluetooth, and we come down here, let's say it was a GS18, and we'd hit search, and we pair it up. Just the first time, it'd remember this, and then pair it up to the GS sensor. Okay. I'm going to hit escape, because once again, we're just in the simulator, and then it'll pair up to that base station. So when you first pair it up, just have the base turned on, the rover off. That way you know which sensor it is. Just pair it up, and we should be in good shape. So we hit connections, all other connections. Once again, we pair it up here, and right now we come down here to RTK1. Okay, and base RTK1, I'll hit F3 edit. And in here, we want to check this box, say transmit RTK data. Since we're hooked up to an external Y cable to a base station, we want this set to port 1. And the device is really important. Okay, so this device here, if I hit the device button down here, F5, it'll pop up and show under the first tab called radio. So if I scroll down, I have the default settings. The GFU27 would be for the old Satel EZ Pro. If I had the newer Satel 4 Pro or EZ Pro Plus, I can pick this Satel HPR3. Now what I can do is, if that's a little bit confusing, I can hit F2 new and create a new name. And I type in like 1 Satel Pro. So what I did is I popped up here and I had a 1 Satel EZ Pro, 2 Satel 4 Pro, and I renamed, and I can delete that duplicate one. And then I could pick that from this screen here. If they're not in there, then once again, scroll down for the Satel EZ Pro and pick GFU27. For the newer radios, HPR3. The reason these are different is the older radio is a 19.2 baud rate, and that's something you want to check because sometimes those radios will come, they'll set to 19.2 or 9600. Make sure that the Satel EZ Pro is programmed up to the 19.2 baud rate. Then the HPR3 is set to 115.2 for the newer style radios. So that's important, and that will communicate from the Y cable sensor to that Satel radio. And once again, RTK format, we've had great luck with Leica 4G or RTCM3 MSM for the base station. Either one. I'll keep it on Leica 4G, but that's optional. The data rates, this is really important. So right now I have Leica 4G. There's a new setting here. So if you have firmware 7.5 or higher, this compact will really compact the data. And this is what makes a world of difference. If you have the older firmware and you only have extended and you're still losing satellites, set that to 2 seconds. It'll put less of a workload on your radio. The arrow will pump only every 2 seconds. You might lose a little bit of performance, but it'll send all 4 frequencies across. So once again, if we have a newer firmware, I'm going to come here. I'll keep it on 1 second and keep that data on compact. Okay, so we'll hit OK. All right. And let's just take another look. There's our data rates, like we said, 1 second compact, time slice, and let's not worry about that. Okay, those are the main settings we have there. So once again, it'd be the GFU27 for the EZ Pro, the old one, and the newer ones would be the HPR3 for the device. Now, once again, if I'm in the base station mode, I can hit Control, and this would allow me to change my channel right here. So right now I'm on channel 2. If I hit channel 1, it would basically update here and show the frequency here on the simulators not hooked up. And since we're running the old Satel EZ Pro, I want to keep this on Satel 4 FSK and keep the forward error correction off. That's very important. If this was a newer radio and it had newer rovers, then I could just change the data modulation or protocol right there to 16 FSK. But once again, with the older EZ Pro, we'll keep that FEC off. What's important is we've got to make sure once the base is set up that the rover is set up the same way. Okay, so we'll hit OK there. And base setup will allow us to set up on a known point. So I can hit known point. Any point will grab an autonomous position and it'll start sending data out and pumping. And once we've done that, then we can switch to the rover mode. Okay, so now if I'm on the rover mode, once again, my rover comes up here, rover radio. And let's take a quick look on the rover side. So I'll hit Settings, Connections, Other Connections. Once again, the GS Connection Wizard, that's how we pair up with Bluetooth to the rover. And the first one says CS Connections. What I do, if I was on internet, I would edit this and just turn it off. It's not critical. It's just one less thing going on. Okay, and then the second tab is GS Connections. So once again, we'll come up to the first line that says RTK Rover. We'll hit Edit. And we want to check the first box and say use GS radio on the rover side. The device, if I hit the device button here, this shows the device that's on the actual rover side. So if this was a newer GS18, it'd be M3TR4. If it's an older GS14, it would be, I think, an M3-TR3. Sometimes you might see an error message saying device already used. When you first do it, it always defaults to this setting here and it won't work. So we have to hit device and pick the radio that's there. If it says device is already used by another system, just hit number 2, new, like we did before, and just rename it, call it internal radio. And store that. And as long as it's something that's not linked to another work style, then you should be fine. We'll hit OK there. And once again, it's important, the RTK data format, this has to match. So we had Leica 4G on the base, need Leica 4G on the rover. This is optional. We can just turn off that information or leave it on. Then RTK base, automatically detect. RTK base is sending a unique ID, uncheck this. Only check this in the worst case scenario. If you're getting stepped on, we have the base set to 0, then that has to match up, otherwise it won't work. So just always make sure that's unchecked if you're trying to troubleshoot. RTK network, this will be unchecked as well. So once again, the main thing is we have the radio and the data type. We'll hit OK. Now, if I'm in the screen here, I can hit the control button, and once again, I've got to make sure I'm on the same channel. So we won't go over how to program the radios. We'll assume that the radios are programmed. You want to make sure the channels are the same on the base and the rover at the same frequency. So once again, I can change to channel 1. It would update here in the real time and show your actual frequency. And once again, the radio protocol has to match up. So in this case, let's say we have an older radio, we can do Satel 4 FSK and uncheck FEC is going to be off. So we'll hit OK there, and then hit OK. And then the arrow should start pumping in. Should pump in every second. And another way to check it is I could click on here and hit change channel, and that's I can change the channel and the protocol right there. So that's a quick hotkey. But once again, those settings would then be stored to the work style. And what would happen, this should be pumping in every second. My satellites here, we should be tracking GPS, Russian, European, and Chinese. So invariably, if you didn't have the settings set correctly and the compact, then once again, you'd be dropping satellites, maybe only tracking 8 on your GPS. Okay. If it came here, RTK data link status would then show how fast the data is coming in every second, all that good stuff. This little data button down here. Okay. All right. And that's a quick overview on how to check the settings on the base and on the rover to make sure that they are set up correctly. Okay. Let me get out of the simulator. Hit exit. We'll go back to the presentation. Just give me a second here. Okay, so just to confirm, on the data rates, if you have the older firmware and you're on the base station, you can output Leica 4G every 2 seconds, and you'd only have it extended. If you had newer firmware, I think it's 7.5 or higher, you can do 1 second, and once again, the message type on the base, compact, would really help compact that data to send it over that older radio. So once again, if we had base and rover, let's go to the scenario number 1. We had a GS18 base, but we had the old Satel EZ Pro and multiple rovers. We had older 14s, 16s, and 18s working off this base. And the question we had is, well, how many rovers can work off a base station at a time? You can have as many as possible working off a base station. Okay. So once again, in the older scenario, what we do is we'd have 25 watts transmit, Satel 3 EZ, which is 4 FSK, FEC is off, RTK data link at 1 second if you have compact, or 2 seconds with extended, and either Leica 4G or RTCM version 3 MSN. We have a 13-degree cutoff angle, and once again, if we're transmitting all the constellations. And once again, the rover size went over. This would have to match up Satel 4 FSK with the Satel 3 EZ. FEC would be off 1 second, and the Leica 4G or RTCM3 has to match up with whatever's on the base station. Okay, and once again, the radio is internal. So that's a brief overview of scenario 1. We have brand new equipment, but we're integrating older 14s. We have to downgrade to the lowest common denominator in that data modulation. So it's almost like a language. This GS14 can only speak in this language here, and the 16s and the 18s can speak in the 4FSK and 16FSK. Okay, so once again, there's the base station. There's actually a button here, the survey firmware. You can click on there, and you can actually change the channels on the base station. We showed you how to do it on the Captivate CS20 as well. And that can change your frequencies if you're getting stepped on. And once again, these are the settings we had on the previous screen. Let's say we had Base and Rover scenario number 2 at a GS18 base, the EZ Pro, and new Rovers. But now if we have the new radios with the 4 Pro or Satel EZ Pro Plus, if you have the Satel 16FSK, this turns on the FEC automatically. And this 16FSK compacts the data very well. So we can export every second. I'd recommend the RTCM version 3 MSN, and we have a 10-degree cutoff angle. And once again, we're using the new radios. And then the 16 and the 18, if they're Rovers, they have the new Radio Protocol. Once again, I think the firmware has to be fairly current. I want to be on at least version 5 on the GS18 or higher, and that should allow that Satel 16FSK, and that would really improve, sending all that data, all the 30, because you have like 30 satellites, GPS, Russian, European, and Chinese. Once again, make sure that it's compacted data as well. That's going to help compact that data and send it out efficiently over the radio. If you were using a repeater, sometimes the repeater, there's a buffer. You could change that RTK data rate to 2 seconds if it has some issues with the repeater struggling, even with this new format, but we should be okay even with repeaters. So repeaters, another base station we can program up, put a few miles out to reboost if you're like at a pit mine and you want to try to get down into that excavation area. Okay. So once again, the Rovers, GS18, want to make sure we have the antenna plugged in. And if we're using the older radios, we're just going to make sure, like I said earlier, the settings on the Rover have to match up with what's on the base. Okay. And so here's our RTK Rovers, GS14s. Once again, it's a real shout out to how well these things have held up. They're phased out in 2016. But once again, if you had a 14, it only can work on that Satel 4FSK FEC off mode. And want to make sure we have a GAD 109, GAT 2. And once again, the radio is receive only. And this M3R3. The new 16s, or newer 16s and 18s, once again, can handle the new language, but also the older language if we're trying to integrate with older equipment. The 16 also has the GAT 2 and GAT 109. Make sure that they're in good shape and make sure it's attached. And it's the GS16 has a 1 watt internal that can transmit and receive. So it can actually act as a 1 watt base station. 1 watt, you probably get maybe half a mile to a mile. And the same with the 18. It's the GAT 28 external antenna for Rover or the base because it can transmit and receive. And it's the new M3TR4 Satel internal radio. Okay. And once again, it's got these different data modulations. Okay, so once again, as we said, GAT 28 goes on the 18, the 109, and the GameFlex goes on the 14 and 16. Just inspect these. If they are damaged, replace them because once again, a bad antenna could lead to radio problems. Okay, just to summarize, scenario number 1, we have a Satel 4 Pro or EZ Pro Plus, and we're integrating with mobile Rovers. So if we had 14s working off the base and 18s and 16s, we got to downgrade to the Satel 4FSK, FEC off on all the Rovers, and that would be the Satel 3AS FEC off setting on the base radio. I'll jump to scenario number 3, where if we had a GS18 base station and we're using the new EZ Pro Plus or 4 Pro, and we just strictly had 16s or 18s, I would jump right to the Satel 16FSK language. The FEC is automatically turned on, can't change it, and this should allow us to stream all the 30 satellite and all 4 constellations out very efficiently. So I'd use scenario 1 or scenario 3 and go through the settings that we did earlier. Okay, this is a glossary of terms. So once again, we have the channel bandwidth. Once again, we have 12.5 kilohertz. That's required in the US. Modulation is the data type. It's like a language. And once again, we have to talk about the 4 FSK and the 16 FSK, and the FEC is for the forward error correction. Once again, with the older types, just turn that off, and it just helps streamline a little bit less data. Okay, radio protocols, like it says here, is considered language. They have to match up. So once again, the 3S is the same as the Satel 4 FSK, and there are, as you can see here, there are some other languages here. If we're trying to interface to Pac Crest, we can pick different languages to interface to different other radios. In this case, we're just talking about Satel to Satel, but there's 3 generations of radios integrating from Base and Rovers. Okay, so once again, we talked about the forward error correction, the radio protocol, and this is a nice shot here. So I couldn't show this in the simulator. When you pick that channel, it should list the actual frequency. It's also good to check that that frequency matches the frequency that's on the base and the rover, because if someone made a typo and programmed it up, you can catch it and see it right there, and just make sure that this frequency matches from the base to the rover. All right, and that concludes the presentation. So hopefully you found that beneficial, and I know there's a lot of information in here, but thanks again for watching, and hope everyone's doing well.